How dare you touch me, human? The alien queen's reluctant bond. The metallic walls of the research station hummed with a low, steady vibration as Dr. Elias Harper adjusted his translator device. Standing in the containment chamber, he felt the intense gaze of the alien queen before him, a towering, elegant being covered in obsidian-like scales that shimmered faintly under the harsh artificial lights. Her piercing violet eyes seemed to dissect his very existence. She was no ordinary specimen. Zora, as she had begrudgingly revealed her name through fragmented translations, was the sovereign of a proud and ancient alien race, captured after a chaotic first contact event. Her presence aboard the station was both a miracle and a political disaster waiting to happen. Elias cleared his throat. Queen Zora, I only seek to understand your physiology better. Your people and mine might coexist someday, but we need to build trust. Her voice echoed in his mind, bypassing the translator entirely. Trust? You cage me like an animal and speak of trust? Pathetic human arrogance. He sighed. I get it. You're angry. I would be too, but... Before he could finish, she took a step forward, the air crackling with an otherworldly energy that made his skin prickle. Enough, her voice reverberated, this time vocalized, sharp and resonant. How dare you speak of peace while you imprison me? How dare you touch me with your filthy hands? Elias instinctively raised his hands, palms out. I wasn't. Silence, she hissed, her tail lashing behind her in a show of dominance. Your kind knows nothing of respect or boundaries. Yet there was something odd in her posture. Despite her anger, Elias noticed a faint tremor in her form. The translator flickered with an error message, unable to fully process the nuances of her language. But Elias had studied body language across countless species. She wasn't just angry, she was exhausted, perhaps even wounded. Taking a calculated risk, he stepped closer, his movements slow and deliberate. Her violet eyes narrowed, but she didn't strike. I know you don't believe me, he said softly, but I'm not your enemy. You've been hurt, more than you're letting on. Let me help. Zora tilted her head, her crest flaring slightly. You presume much, human. Why should I accept aid from the very species that brought me here in chains? Because not all of us are the same, Elias replied, and because if we don't try to bridge this gap, we're doomed to repeat the same mistakes over and over. For a moment, the room was silent, save for the faint hum of the station's systems. Then, to his surprise, she extended one clawed hand. It hovered in the air between them, an unmistakable challenge. Prove your sincerity, she said. Her voice was quieter now, almost a whisper, but still laced with the weight of her authority. Touch me, human. Show me you are not afraid. Elias hesitated. This was a gamble with unknown stakes, but he took a deep breath and reached out, his hand trembling slightly as it neared her scaled palm. The instant his fingers made contact, a surge of warmth and energy coursed through him, as though he'd tapped into a living storm. Images flooded his mind, flashes of her homeworld, her people, the pain of their capture, and the overwhelming loneliness of her captivity. Her voice, now softer, resonated in his thoughts. You are bold, human, foolish, but bold. Perhaps there is hope for your kind after all. As their connection faded, Elias stumbled back, his heart racing. Zora's expression remained unreadable, but there was a faint glimmer in her eyes, something that might have been respect. Do not think this makes us allies, she said, but, you have earned a chance. Elias smiled faintly. That's all I'm asking for. From that moment, their reluctant bond became the foundation for an alliance neither of their species could have foreseen. Trust, though fragile, began to grow between the alien queen and the human scientist, a bond that might one day reshape the galaxy. Days passed, and the dynamic between Elias and Queen Zora began to shift. Though she remained aloof and imperious, there were moments when her guard lowered, revealing fragments of vulnerability. Elias documented their interactions meticulously, careful to treat her with the respect she demanded, and had, in many ways, earned. One morning, Elias approached the containment chamber carrying a portable data slate. He stopped just outside the shimmering energy field that separated them, nodding politely. Queen Zora, I'd like to show you something. She turned slowly, her regal form illuminated by the pale light of the chamber. Her violet eyes narrowed. Another attempt to extract my secrets, human? No, he said firmly. It's about trust, remember? I thought you might want to see what we've learned about your homeworld. Her posture stiffened. You dare to pry into my people's history? Elias held up his hands defensively. I'm not here to exploit it. I've been studying the imagery you shared with me during that moment. He gestured to his head, referencing the psychic link they'd briefly shared. I've pieced together data from our star charts. I think I've pinpointed where your planet is, or was. For the first time, Zora's stern expression faltered. A flicker of pain crossed her features. quickly masked by her usual composure. "Show me." Elias pressed a few buttons on the slate, projecting a hologram into the air. A swirling galaxy materialized, and he zoomed in on a cluster of stars. Among them was a planet marked in gold. "Here," he said, pointing. "This region matches the environment you shared, the twin suns, the auroras, the mountainous terrain. It's breathtaking. Your world must have been extraordinary." Zora stepped closer to the hologram, her claws twitching at her sides. She stared at the golden dot for a long moment, her silence heavy. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "It was more than extraordinary, it was sacred." She extended a hand toward the image as if she could reach through time and space. "You cannot comprehend what was lost when your kind intruded." Elias frowned. "Zora, I don't think humanity was responsible for what happened to your planet. When our ships found your fleet adrift, it looked like you were fleeing something." Her gaze snapped to him, sharp as a blade. "Do not presume to lecture me on my people's suffering, human. You know nothing of the horrors we endured." "I don't," he admitted, "but I want to. Help me understand. If we're going to prevent this from happening again, to your people or anyone else, we need to work together." Zora studied him, her eyes narrowing. "And if I refuse?" Elias met her gaze steadily. "Then I'll keep trying anyway, because I believe there's more to you than anger and pain. I've seen it." For a moment, it seemed she might lash out. Instead, she turned away, her tail swaying in agitation. "You tread a dangerous path, Elias Harper, but perhaps there is value in your persistence." The faintest smile tugged at the corners of Elias's lips. It wasn't a victory, not yet, but it was progress. Over the following weeks, Zora began to share fragments of her story. Through their conversations, Elias learned of the Kyler, the name of her species, and their ancient civilization, a society built on honor, tradition, and symbiotic bonds with their environment. The twin sons of her homeworld, Orelise Prime, were revered as life-giving deities. But all of it had been destroyed. A nomadic, machine-like species called the Vorax had descended upon Orelise Prime, consuming its resources and leaving nothing but desolation in their wake. The Kyler had fought valiantly but were ultimately forced to flee. Zora's fleet was one of the last remnants of her people, scattered across the galaxy like dying embers. Elias listened intently, his heart aching with every word. "We've encountered fragments of the Vorax before," he said one evening. "They're a threat to more than just your species. If we could combine our knowledge." "No." Zora's voice was sharp, cutting him off. "The Kyler fight alone. We do not need your pity or your assistance." "It's not pity," Elias countered. "It's survival. The Vorax won't stop with you. They'll come for us too. If we don't stand together, we'll all be wiped out." Her silence stretched, her violet eyes fixed on him. Finally, she spoke, her tone measured. "You believe your fragile species has something to offer in battle against the Vorax?" "Yes," he said without hesitation. "Maybe we're not as advanced as you, but we're resourceful, we adapt, and more than anything, we're stubborn enough to fight for what we believe in." Zora's gaze softened, just slightly. "Stubbornness is not a virtue, human, but perhaps it is a start." Their reluctant alliance was still fragile, but as the days turned into weeks, trust began to grow. Together, they forged a plan, a risky, desperate mission to strike back against the Vorax and reclaim the future for both their species. And for the first time in her life, Zora allowed herself to hope. The cold expanse of space stretched endlessly before the Kyler warship, Vraxis. As it emerged from hyperspace near a barren star system, the crew, made up of Kyler survivors and a small contingent of human volunteers, moved with purpose across the ship's sprawling command deck. The mission ahead was a gambit, a calculated risk to strike at the heart of a Vorax outpost. Queen Zora stood at the helm, her presence commanding as always. Her obsidian scales reflected the dim lighting, and the faint glow of her violet eyes seemed to pierce the very void itself. Beside her stood Elias, clad in an advanced human exosuit designed for the harshest of environments. He looked both awed and wary, his expression one of quiet determination. "We have one chance," Zora announced, her voice carrying authority that silenced all murmurs. "The Vorax do not expect us to fight back, let alone infiltrate one of their hive cores. They see us as prey, nothing more." Elias nodded. "And that's where we have the advantage. If we can plant the fusion disruptor within their processing core, it'll destabilize the entire outpost." A low growl came from one of Zora's lieutenants, a hulking Kyler warrior named Vrath. "This plan is reckless. Trusting humans to fight alongside us is a mistake, my queen." Zora didn't flinch. "It is not your place to question me, Vrath. These humans have proven their resolve. If we fail, we all perish, species, traditions, and honor alike." Elias stepped forward, his voice firm but respectful. "We're in this together, Vrath. Whether you trust me or not, I'm here to help. The Kyler warrior bared his fangs but said nothing more. As the team prepared for the mission, Zora found herself alone in the warship's observation chamber, staring out at the void. Her mind was a tempest of emotions, anger, hope, and a lingering doubt that gnawed at her resolve. "You're worried," came Elias's voice from behind her. She didn't turn. "Worry is a weakness I cannot afford." "Not true," he said, stepping up beside her. "Worry means you care, that's what drives us to keep fighting." Her eyes flicked to him, her tone sharp. "Do not presume to understand me, human." "I'm not presuming," he said quietly. "I've seen it in your eyes. You carry the weight of your people's survival, but you don't have to bear it alone." Zora turned fully to face him, her expression unreadable. "And you, Elias Harper? What weight do you carry?" He hesitated, then sighed. "I've lost people too. My wife, my crew on the Ardent. The Vorex didn't take them directly, but they took the world we were defending. That's why I'm here, to make sure no one else has to go through that." For a moment, Zora said nothing. Then, in a voice softer than he'd ever heard, she said, "Perhaps you are more Kyler than I thought." Elias chuckled faintly. "I'll take that as a compliment." The infiltration of the Vorex hive core was as harrowing as they had anticipated. The outpost was a labyrinth of metallic tunnels, pulsating with an eerie, organic energy. The Vorex drones moved methodically, their sleek, insect-like forms blending seamlessly with their surroundings. Elias and Zora led the team through the twisting corridors, relying on a combination of human tech and Kyler instincts to avoid detection. Every step felt like walking a razor's edge. At one point, a patrol of drones passed dangerously close. The team froze, pressing against the cold walls as the machine's scanning beam swept the corridor. Zora's tail twitched, her muscles coiled like a spring, ready to strike if necessary. When the patrol moved on, Elias exhaled in relief. "Too close. Stay focused," Zora whispered. "We're not out yet." They reached the processing core, a cavernous chamber glowing with a sickly green light. At its center stood the hive mind's nexus, a pulsating sphere of crystalline data feeds. It radiated an oppressive energy that made Elias's skin crawl. "This is it," he said, pulling the fusion disruptor from his pack. "Give me cover while I set it up." As Elias worked, Zora and the others formed a defensive perimeter. The Vorex quickly detected the intrusion, and the chamber erupted in chaos. Drones swarmed from every direction, their metallic screeches echoing through the air. Zora fought like a force of nature, her claws and tail tearing through drones with precision and fury. Beside her, Elias fired his plasma rifle, each shot aimed with the calm focus of a seasoned soldier. "Almost there," Elias shouted over the cacophony. A massive Vorex enforcer emerged from the shadows, its towering form bristling with weaponry. It charged toward Elias, its bladed limbs slicing through the air. "No!" Zora roared, leaping between Elias and the enforcer. She clashed with the machine, her strength barely a match for its relentless assault. Elias finished arming the disruptor and turned just in time to see Zora locked in a deadly struggle. Without thinking, he grabbed a thermal charge from his belt and hurled it at the enforcer. The explosion sent the machine staggering, giving Zora the opening she needed to drive her claws into its core. The enforcer collapsed in a heap of sparking metal. "It's done," Elias yelled. "We have to go, now." Zora didn't hesitate. "Fall back, everyone. Move." As they fled the hive, the disruptor detonated. A wave of energy rippled through the outpost, collapsing its structures and consuming the Vorex in a fiery cascade. The team barely made it to their ship before the entire station imploded. On the Vraxis, Zora and Elias stood side by side on the bridge, watching the explosion fade into the distance. For the first time, a faint smile crossed her lips. "You have proven yourself, human," she said. "Perhaps our species are not so different after all." Elias grinned, exhaustion evident in his eyes. "Told you we're stubborn." Their alliance, born of necessity, was now forged in fire. Together, they had struck a blow against the Vorex, a small victory in a much larger war. But for the first time, there was hope. And in the void of space, hope was a powerful thing. The aftermath of the mission was both triumphant and sobering. Though the destruction of the Vorex outpost was a crucial victory, it had come at a cost. Several members of the team, both Kyler and human, had been lost in the battle. The survivors returned to the Vraxis scarred but resolute, their bond forged through shared sacrifice. Elias sat alone in the observation chamber, staring out at the stars. He held a small, scorched emblem in his hand, the insignia of Corporal Dana Wells, one of the human volunteers who hadn't made it back. Her death weighed heavily on him, as did the memories of the others who had fallen. "You mourn them?" Zora's voice pulled him from his thoughts. He turned to see her standing at the entrance, her imposing figure framed by the soft glow of the corridor behind her. She stepped into the chamber, her movements as graceful as ever, but there was a noticeable weariness in her posture. "I do," Elias admitted, setting the emblem down. "They gave everything for this mission. It doesn't feel like enough to just say we won." Zora inclined her head. "Among the Kyler, we honor the fallen by carrying their memory into battle. Each loss becomes a part of us, a lesson to guide our future. It is not the pain of their passing that defines us, but the strength we gain from their sacrifice." He considered her words, then nodded. "That's a good way to look at it, but it doesn't make it easier." "No," she agreed, her voice quieter. "It does not." For a moment, they stood in silence, two leaders from different worlds united in grief. "Elias," Zora said finally, her tone softening in a way that was becoming more familiar, "you have proven your worth time and again, not just as a fighter, but as someone willing to bear the burdens of leadership. I see now why your people have survived despite their flaws." He raised an eyebrow. "I'll take that as a compliment." "It is," she replied, her lips curving in the faintest smile. The days that followed were filled with planning and recovery. The success of the mission had sent ripples through both the Kyler and human factions, sparking renewed hope that the Vorax could be defeated. For the first time, their two species began to work together in earnest, pooling resources and knowledge to prepare for the battles ahead. But not everyone was ready to embrace the alliance. During a strategy briefing aboard the Vraxis, Vrath stepped forward to address Zora and the assembled council. "My queen," he said, his voice reverberating through the chamber, "while the humans have proven their usefulness, I question the wisdom of allowing them to fight alongside us in the future. They are reckless, unpredictable, and lack the discipline of the Kyler." Zora regarded him with a calm but steely gaze. "And yet it was their recklessness that saved you and the rest of this crew. Do not mistake unfamiliarity for inferiority, Vrath." Elias, who stood quietly at the edge of the room, felt the tension in the air. He chose his words carefully before speaking. "We're not perfect," he said, "but neither are you. That's why this alliance works. We make up for each other's weaknesses. We're stronger together than we are apart." The room fell silent as Zora rose to her full height, her presence commanding. "Elias is correct," she said firmly. "The Vorax are a threat to us all. If we do not stand united, we will fall divided. This is not a matter of pride, Vrath, it is survival." Vrath bowed his head reluctantly. "As you command, my queen." In the weeks that followed, Elias and Zora spent more time together, their conversations ranging from strategy to philosophy. Though they came from vastly different worlds, they found common ground in their shared determination to protect their people. One evening, as they reviewed star charts in the war room, Zora paused to study Elias. "You surprise me, human," she said. "How so?" he asked, glancing up. "You carry the weight of your people's survival with the same intensity as I do, yet you never let it consume you. I envy that." Elias smiled faintly. "Maybe it's because I know I'm not alone. I have you, and your people, by my side." For the first time, Zora seemed taken aback. She turned her gaze to the holographic stars before her, a rare flicker of uncertainty crossing her face. "Do not place too much faith in me, Elias," she said quietly. "I am not infallible." "No one is," he replied, "but that's what makes us stronger. We rely on each other to make up for what we lack. That's what trust is all about." She looked at him then, her expression softening. "Perhaps you are right. Perhaps there is more to this alliance than I had anticipated." Their bond, once born of necessity, had deepened into something neither of them had expected, a friendship built on mutual respect, and the beginnings of something far greater. As the Vraxis set course for their next mission, Elias and Zora stood together on the bridge, ready to face whatever challenges awaited them. The galaxy was vast and uncertain, but one thing was clear: together, they were a force to be reckoned with. The Vraxis cut through the darkness of space, its engines humming steadily as it approached the rendezvous point with the human fleet. The tension aboard the ship was palpable. This was no ordinary meeting, it was the first official gathering of Kyler and human leadership to formalize their alliance. Queen Zora stood at the observation window, her violet eyes fixed on the distant cluster of human vessels. The human ships were smaller and less ornate than the Kyler vessels, but there was a rugged practicality to their design that she had come to respect. Beside her, Elias adjusted the collar of his uniform, clearly nervous. "Relax," Zora said, her tone dry. "You look as though you're about to face execution." Elias chuckled weakly. "Honestly, this feels just as bad. Human politicians aren't exactly known for their open-mindedness. They're going to grill you, and me, for every little detail." "Let them," Zora said, her voice laced with confidence. "I have nothing to hide, and neither do you. If they cannot see the value of our alliance, then they are fools. Fools with a lot of power, Elias muttered, earning a rare smirk from Zora. The meeting took place aboard the human flagship, the Resolute. The conference room was stark and utilitarian, a sharp contrast to the grandeur of Kyler Chambers. Representatives from both species filled the room, their postures rigid with distrust. Zora entered with her usual grace, her presence commanding immediate attention. Elias followed closely, feeling the weight of every gaze on him. The lead human representative, Admiral Katrina Cole, stood to greet them. She was a formidable figure, her sharp eyes taking in every detail of Zora's appearance. "Queen Zora," Cole said, extending a hand, "thank you for coming." Zora glanced at the hand, then clasped it with her clawed fingers. "Admiral Cole, let us hope this meeting proves fruitful." Cole's lips twitched in a faint smile. "That depends on how honest we're willing to be with each other." The group settled into their seats, and the negotiations began. Hours passed as they debated logistics, strategies, and the terms of their alliance. The humans were cautious, reluctant to fully trust the Kyler after years of mistrust between their species. Likewise, some of the Kyler representatives voiced concerns about humanity's unpredictability and lack of honor-driven traditions. Elias found himself acting as a bridge, mediating between the two sides. "Look," he said, leaning forward during one particularly heated exchange, "I get it, neither side has a spotless record, but we're not here to dredge up the past, we're here because the Vorax are a threat to all of us. We either stand together, or we fall alone, it's that simple." Admiral Cole regarded him carefully. "And you're certain the Kyler won't turn on us once the Vorax are dealt with?" Elias glanced at Zora, who met his gaze evenly. "The Kyler do not break their oaths," she said firmly. "Our word is our bond. If we commit to this alliance, we will honor it." Cole studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Fair enough." As the negotiations continued, a sudden alert blared through the ship. "Admiral," a voice crackled over the comms, "we're detecting a Vorax fleet entering the system." The room fell silent as everyone processed the news. "How many ships?" Cole demanded. "At least 10, maybe more. They're heading straight for us." Zora rose to her feet, her expression calm but resolute. "Then it seems we have an opportunity to prove the strength of our alliance." Cole hesitated, then nodded. "Agreed, let's show them what we can do." The battle that followed was unlike anything either side had experienced before. Human and Kyler ships moved in coordination, their combined strategies pushing the limits of what the Vorax could handle. Zora took command of the Kyler fleet, her sharp instincts and unyielding determination driving their forces forward. Beside her, Elias coordinated with human pilots, relaying information and offering tactical advice. "Focus fire on their carriers," Elias shouted over the comms. "Without those, their drones will be disorganized." "Understood," Zora replied, her voice steady. "Kyler vessels, target the carriers, leave nothing behind." The combined fleet worked as one, their firepower overwhelming the Vorax ships. By the time the last Vorax carrier exploded, the humans in Kyler had sustained heavy damage, but their victory was undeniable. In the aftermath of the battle, Zora and Elias stood together on the bridge of the Vraxis, watching as the surviving ships regrouped. "You fought well," Zora said, her tone tinged with rare praise. Elias smiled tiredly. "So did you. I think we made our point today." "Indeed," she said, "today, we proved that unity is not a weakness, it is a strength the Vorax will come to fear." As the stars stretched out before them, Zora and Elias shared a moment of quiet understanding. They had forged something greater than an alliance, they had laid the foundation for a future where their species could stand together, not just against the Vorax, but against any challenge the galaxy might throw their way. And for the first time in a long while, the future didn't feel so uncertain.